Hi, this is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Hope you enjoyed this Game Industry Insight, a look behind the scenes at game development. And be sure to subscribe and you can pitch future video topics. Alright everybody, for today's Industry Insight, it's going to be a quick one, but a very important one for developers, especially indie variety who are watching this. We're returning to the subject of PR. And like we've talked about before, there are many avenues that we can discuss. But for today, we're going to talk about dealing with your fan base. Fans of video games can be a double-edged sword. If you treat them well, they will be your evangelists and help spread the word about your game. If you piss them off, they will be lifelong enemies until your studio goes out of business. And as we've seen over the last few years, there have been several big cases of indie developers kind of blowing up the bridge when it comes to PR on this front. And I was thinking about this after we did our podcast interview with Jan from Overhyped Studios and some of the things I've heard from talking to indie developers in the past. Now, like I said, when it comes to PR topics, there's a lot to go over. If you have any suggestions for future ones to tackle next, let me know in the comments below. But for today, I want to talk about basically negotiating or talking with your fan base. Now, when it comes to your fans, especially for games that go through early access and the transparency around it, chances are things aren't always going to go as planned. As we've talked about previously, very few games, if I can't even think of any games that have gone through basically beginning to end and not had any major changes. And sometimes you have to give bad news to people. Now, thankfully, game developers won't be the people who will have to deliver news like, we're sorry your relative has passed away, but you have to do something probably equally or maybe a little bit harder than that. Keep thousands of people from getting pissed off at you due to bad news. And when I talked with Jan about this with Battle Brawlers and what they did with Overhype, he talked about how there is an art when it comes to delivering bad news. And there's a very big difference between saying, we can't do something because there's not enough money in it or we don't have the expertise, versus saying something like, we can't do this because it's a stupid idea, you moron, get off my forums. And if you haven't guessed, you don't want to say the latter on any forum or website that you own. And this reminds me of a discussion I had with, I think his name was Nels Anderson, back when he worked at Clay Entertainment on Don't Starve. I think he was either doing that Firewatch game or A Night in the Woods, one of those two. I think that's what he moved on to. But, sorry about that. When we talked, he mentioned how he was very quick to immediately respond to someone posting on the message boards about any problems with Don't Starve or anything from Clay, and he realized as a cooling down mechanism, he would always wait like 20 to 30 minutes before responding to any posts on the forum, and that was to make sure that he wasn't responding out of emotion. And as we've seen, one of the biggest things, or one of the biggest no-nos that you can do when it comes to interacting with your fans is basically going full flame. Even if they are yelling and ranting and raving about how you're a horrible developer, your game sucks, how would you design this and all that, you still have to keep an even head. It's better to let them flame out or just, ban them for excessive language rather than engaging at that level. Because one thing you don't want as a indie studio is someone having recorded evidence of you yelling at fans or saying anything hyperbolic there, or hyperbole. Now, another part about dealing with your fans is especially when it comes to suggestions, and this could easily be its own topic for today. But another great thing about early access and that level of transparency is that people get to see behind the scenes of what your game is about, and they can offer any number of suggestions. And when it comes to designing a game, especially those built on random or procedurally generated elements, having thousands of eyes on your game can be worth its weight in gold when it comes to that feedback. Because again, if you are a 3 or even like a 1 or 2 man team, there's no way you're going to be able to check everything or see how everything works in relation to each other. So having all these people look at your game and offer you suggestions can be huge, especially for making your game as polished as it can be for when you release it at 1.0. But there's always that tendency to go too far when it comes to listening to your fans. Again, your fans can be great. They can offer many, many suggestions. But at the end of the day, you still need to see just how can you implement it all. And in many cases, you can't. When I talked with Jan about Battle Brothers, he mentioned how for every suggestion they got or every idea they had for the game, they prioritized it in terms of how big it would impact the game or how much it would affect it and how much time and money it would cost. Because that is very important, because at the end of the day, as we all know, game developers don't have infinite money to work on any game project. And sometimes you have to make those hard choices. An idea that sounds really good but maybe only impacts 20% of the people playing is not the same as an idea that may be a little harder to do but could impact 70-80% of the people playing your game. And again, you have to weigh time and money to impact to any and all suggestions. And as we said a few minutes ago, it's also important to lay down the law or lay down the line for what you can and can't do. We've brought this up before, but when it comes to suggestions, one of the most popular ones for just about any single player game is, of course, adding multiplayer, be it co-op, PvE, PvP, etc. And while that is certainly a great idea for games, it can be a lot of work. And it's important to tell the consumer just what exactly the scope of your project is and what you intend and what you can't can't end up doing. My mouth is starting to stutter and my allergies are bothering me. Sorry about that. And again, when we were talking with Jan, he mentioned about the importance of being able to convey bad news. Again, in Magical Perfect World, you could do everything. If you want to add a first-person shooting element to your game, you could do that. If you want to completely add in procedurally generated levels on par with crafted levels, yes, that would be great. But again, we don't live in that magic perfect world. And another major part about listening to your fans and knowing what you can and can't do goes back to your core gameplay loop or your foundation. Again, your foundation of your game is the DNA of what your game's going to be about. And any changes to that is going to affect every aspect of your title. And it's important to know what your foundation is and to have that set as early as possible. When I talked with Charles from Gyra Technologies, or I may have just mispronounced that, on his game Concealed Intent, he talked about how he took a lot of suggestions from his fans and the testers during the early access period. But there was one thing he would not change, and that was the kind of sonar-like gameplay he had in mind for the game. And when we talked about this on podcast, he said this very simply, that if he was going to change that, he wasn't going to have Concealed Intent anymore. And that's the line that you have to never cross when it comes to listening to your fans and feedback. If what they suggest is going to change what your game is, and you're not even making the same game anymore, then you really need to stop and think. If you are adamant about making this game, then that's a change that cannot happen. If you're getting to the point where you're thinking about making those grand changes, then you really need to stop and look at your design and think about whether or not this idea has merit. Because if everyone says that they want a completely different game and you want to make a completely different game, then something has gone terribly wrong in the pipeline. But to wrap things up, again, when it comes to listening to your fans, they are a never-ending source of information and good, bad, and sometimes completely insane ideas. But it's always important to let them know that you are listening. Even if you can't respond, it's always wise to just say that, we always take all your ideas into consideration. We may or may not be able to respond to them all. As we've talked about with early access, you never want people to think that you're not listening or you're not there. Because as we've said at the start, fans can be the greatest of friends or the worst of enemies to your game. And you do not want to give them any ammunition or any reason to think that you aren't doing your job. And like I said, when it comes to PR, there are a lot of different aspects we can talk about from here. From managing a community, community support, events, bonuses, subscriber content, anything like that. But that will have to be for another time. So for tonight, we're going to end things here. For those of you watching this, especially for those of you who are developers, how have you engaged with your community, and have you ever had to deliver bad news? And if you did, how did you manage to do it without hopefully pissing off everyone playing your game? With that said, thank you so much for watching. If you're new, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you have a suggestion, be sure to let me know below. And check back daily for more great discussions on game design here and on GameWisdom.com. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And of course, share with your friends. It always helps out. For daily posts on all manner of game design and industry topics, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the site and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign. If we can hit goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy, and I'll be able to support myself and my household. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at GW for updates throughout the day and random thoughts from me. And lastly, you can find me on Twitch right over there at GW for daily streams most nights around 10 Eastern. Thanks again for watching the video, and be sure to check out more great content coming to the Game Wisdom channel real soon.